I've really felt so alone, hopeless. And yet something about connecting to this inspiring state that I will make it through, that my life has meaning, that there is a purpose, and I am right about that. And focusing on that as a really big picture way that you're going to live your life really pulls you through. Do whatever you can to make it through, and make sure that you're not judging yourself through it, and actually somehow trusting every day that life will get better. Because I do believe that we are powerful creators, and that as long as there's that flame of hope and that practical sense of just getting through day after day, if you will find the resources, you will be able to heal, and you will be able to make sense of the pain or the struggles and challenges you're going through. That's speaking from personal experiences. Sometimes I didn't have the answer, but I'm just going to keep going, and I'm just going to be as kind as I can through this. And eventually the clouds parted, and it seems to be a theme that I've talked to a lot of people, and they come out these phases. So I would say in a really dire situation, sometimes it's about just making it through. But if you do feel more, maybe it applies more if you're trapped in a job that, is maybe soul sucking, and you're just healing out of a relationship and you're getting back out into the world, it would be to see your life like you are the hero on the hero's journey. Raise your whole context of your life into a more inspiring state. The way I do this is I connect to people throughout history that lived through some of the most ridiculous challenges imaginable, and seeing they persevered, and they did so for love. They did so for goodness, for virtues, to have an impact greater than themselves. And it's not that ego thing of, I've got to conquer the world and become, not in that sense, but just for its own sake, to be a vehicle of inspiration and love for its own sake. And if you can know that that's possible for you, and you deserve to think about your life in that context, you will start manifesting things into your life that start nudging you on what you can do, whether that is just volunteering on a weekend, or whether that's a new business idea that you slowly will start taking baby steps to creating. And as soon as you're on that path of greater meaning, you're seeing your life as a hero on its journey, it really helps alleviate your focus on your pain and starts gearing your life towards something more creative and divine, inspiring. I found that a sense that I'm living for that really pulled me through.
Welcome to the Awakening Entrepreneur Podcast. This show is for entrepreneurs that have chosen to define their life beyond the material. They have followed their soul on a hero's journey towards the mystery of the spiritual. I'm your host, Garrett Moon. Each episode will be learning from awakened entrepreneurs and spiritual thought leaders. They have broken through the mold of being ordinary to extraordinary, challenging our paradigm, shining light to the dark, giving hope when there is doubt. The moment of truth is upon us. It is time to transcend our world from fear to love. Are you ready? Let's go! Welcome to this episode of the Awakening Entrepreneur Podcast. Today, I've got someone local. I searched all around the world for the best awakened guest that's appropriate at the right moment to be on this show. And today we've got someone in Melbourne, Australia. And if you don't know, Melbourne is just one record for the longest lockdown city in the world. Sydney is probably not that far behind, but I've got my brother here, Tom Douce. He's a spiritual teacher, he's an intuitive guy, he's a mystic, and he helps other people awaken to their divine potential and create their happiest life through the modern heart-centered and integrated spiritual teachings. Another thing that I like to look at Tom is I see him as like a wonder kid, as I don't know what you call it, indigo child, rainbow child, unicorn child, whatever you like to call it. But it took me like 40 plus years to wake up to the nature of reality, to rise my level of consciousness. And we've got this new wave, at least according to Dolores Cannon's book, The Three Waves, as the third wave of people that's coming to with a more heightened or high level of consciousness, that's going to be the wave that helps to change how the way the world operates and how we see the world. So thank you for coming on this podcast, Tom.
Thank you, Gary. That's an amazing intro, and I love the unicorn kid. I was like, I haven't heard that one, but I like that. I like that there's such a thing as a unicorn kid. That sounds really fun. Yeah, thank you for having me on the podcast today.
You know, one of the things that I find really enjoying to do this podcast, I feel like
Mhm.
as one of the signs that awakening, people that's going for a spiritual awakening that they go through is like, at first, it's like, what's going on with me? Like, and then
Mhm.
most of us had no idea what was happening to us or for us. And then before you know it, you're deep in the hole of like trying to navigate your way out of the dark night. And at that time, usually, it's a pretty lonely place because the people around you, they're not going through the same thing. It's not like growing up, you're going through puberty and you know that your older siblings, your older friends, your parents have gone through puberty. It's like, who do I
Mhm.
turn to? And the people around you think that what you're sharing is crazy. I know that when I was going through my suicide attempts or failed suicide attempts, it's like, wow, this is such a blessing. It's like, all this synchronicity is happening around me, and the people around me are saying like, dude, you shouldn't like have done that, but I knew that it was a gift in some way that most people wouldn't understand. You would understand. So together, our tribe from around the world, and for me to get to know you and know other guests and connect our tribe together, and also the people that's following this podcast, they got to follow the journey together as a tribe, as a movement, that there's other brotherhoods and sisterhoods that's going through the same thing. It's very heartwarming.
Yes, absolutely. Wow, I did not know about that about your journey. So that's yeah, really inspiring to me. I'm so glad that we're here in this moment having this conversation.
So, brother, for
Yeah.
those that don't know about your journey, tell us what's your journey like? How do you
Mm.
become like a spiritual teacher?
Yes. Well, it's really interesting how you said, in the beginning of your awakening, you don't really know what's going on. I was going to say, even to this day, I don't know what's going on. It never ends, like the amount of expansion and the challenges, and we're all human here. And I put myself above no one, even though I'm a spiritual teacher. Well, first and foremost, I'm a human being, and I really believe that this is a movement in unity, and that we're all walking each other home. It's not about one person getting there and like it's like an achievement of getting there, wherever that is. But yeah, I really feel like we're in this together as a journey. But having said that, the way I kind of got into this, follow my purpose the way it is right now, the spiritual path was an interesting thing because although I grew up in a household that, wasn't very religious or anything like that, it was quite open, loosely kind of Christian, Catholic kind of background or anything like that. But we were very free to explore when I was growing up. And I actually got into science and I was like really questioning things, questioning society. And I decided that I didn't believe in anything. I didn't believe in a higher power, God. And I became like a strong atheist, scientific minded, rational person for many years. And I still had a deep quest for truth though. Like it was like I still, even with this philosophical kind of scientific mindset, I want to understand the deep secrets of the universe. It was just guiding me, and not only that, and I think this is something that everyone resonates with, but living a life that you can truly look back on and say, wow, I'm so fulfilled. I'm so at peace because I really tapped into some kind of gift and potential within me. I really expressed that to the world for the well-being of everyone. And I did that. And it was a huge hero's journey, but I did it. So as a teenager, I was constantly seeking my purpose and living this kind of life that I felt would be really fulfilling and extraordinary and happy, and also the secrets of the universe. And so it led me to studying philosophy and at university, and that gave me no answers. In fact, I remember in our philosophy classes, we were talking about spiritual ideas that I've come to really find deep peace in. And we would actually laugh at them as intellectual nonsense. And I remember we were laughing at some spiritual Eastern mystic that said the nothing nothings. And I remember my philosophy teacher at the time, he laughed at that, go, what gibberish, the nothing nothings? And we're all like, ha. Anyway, but I'm like, actually really true. That statement's actually really true. And yeah, it led me to this state basically after university where I didn't know my purpose and I didn't have any answers. And I fell into like a really deep state of depression, despair, apathy, existential crisis, not even in a singular moment, but just a prolonged, ongoing, like, don't know how I'm going to get out of this type of thing. And I was living with my girlfriend at the time in a really crappy apartment in a really like dodgy part of my city where I live, working a casual job, even though I had a degree and there was societal pressure to pursue a career. I turned my back on, so I turned my back on that, and I'm sitting there without any ideas, not knowing really what I'm going to do and where I'm going. And I just had this crisis, breaking point moment where really I deem my spiritual journey began. Yeah, it was a moment on the bed after that period of existential crisis where I wanted to find the meaning. And I remember lying on this bed and having no answers and just feeling this darkness envelop me. And it was like a void sucking me into infinite meaningless and despair and just hopelessness. And that moment, I didn't really believe in a higher power still, or I was maybe just opening to it, but I just found myself impulsively just saying the word faith. I said faith, 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 faith. I don't know why I was saying it, what I was saying it for, to whom, but then all of a sudden, in an instant, I don't know where it came from, but within my heart, this love came. It felt like from another dimension. It just came into my heart, and it just sat there momentarily, and then exploded, and it went through my entire body. My entire consciousness left this any sense of being a person in this limited way into a cosmic, universal expansiveness in which there was no opposite but this love, limitless love, cascading upon horizon upon horizon upon horizon, infinitely extending in all directions. No way to debate it, no way to argue it, just this absolute love. And it was a watershed moment, because you're in this state and you're not thinking about it, but there's an epiphany that hits you at the very core. It just downloads into your heart and soul, every fiber of your being. We awaken into it and you go, this is the truth. You can't explain it. It's like the sun shining up in the morning and shining upon your face. When you feel that light on your face, you don't question, is this the sun? We all accept the sun rises and we feel it and it warms us up. It's like that, but infinitely more powerful, that love. And you feel home, and it completely healed. I felt this healing just surge into my body, into this void space. And it's not that I became religious or anything in that sense, but I recognized that we're all sparks of this higher divine source. Call it what you will. Scientific people may call this the quantum field of potentiality. Maybe a more religious oriented person, and people call it God. I like kind of calling it God in sort of a mystical sense, or the source. But that was the real first turning point where I kind of came back from that experience, tears wet on my shirt from this experience. And I realized, okay, I think there's something else to life here. And whatever that dimension is, it became the guiding focal point of my entire life from that point, to reunify into that oneness more and more. And then by happenstance, I realized that my deep purpose, that realization that I was driving towards truth, was to find this, and that then I want them to share this with everyone so that they can feel that love. Because when you're touched by that love, it fills you up. And in that moment that you experience that love, your entire life flashes before your very eyes, and you realize this is what you've been seeking in your home. And you realize that every human being just wants to belong. We all just want that love. We all just want to feel worthy, and that's within you. It's absolutely within you, and you are that. And when you experience that, you melt into that, and you become this open vessel for that kind of energy to pour into the planet through these ideas, to touch the heart of everyone, so that we can all remember that which we never lost, that which we've always been and are in this very moment, but we just don't remember. And that's kind of the game and purpose of life, and why this whole thing is going on, in my humble opinion, is to remember the love that we are. Because when you are that love the whole time, there's nothing, you haven't lost it, there's nothing to compare it to. So we create this game just to remember that. So it's a really beautiful journey. So that's kind of a long-winded explanation.
You know what I loved about your sharing your story, especially when you talk about the infinite love? Some people, when they share their stuff, you can tell that they're sharing it from a conceptual, theoretical standpoint, but you can feel it that you're sharing it from your heart, and it's become who you are, at least a part of who you are, a significant part of who you are. So there wasn't any part of you trying to overplay it or downplay it. The love that you felt, it is what it is.
Yes. I can say the same about you. I can just feel your openness and your lightness, and you can't fake that. That's obviously all the amazing work you've done in your own spiritual journey. And it's a contagious energy, because I think we all deep down, I mean, not in any arrogant sense, but I think all of us kind of feel that pull towards love, whether that's the love in a soulmate, in a meaningful career and purpose, or anything. And there's no judgment against anything. All of it's a unique journey, but there's some kind of love and happiness that we're being pulled to. And it's the pull towards our recognition of our own nature, ultimately, in every form, in every beautiful soul's journey. We ultimately find that we come back to this place. And I think that's an idea I read once in A Course of Miracles, is that no matter how despairing we can look at the world and see the situation and go, this is a big mess. This doesn't look like, what's he talking about love? This is new age nonsense, right? It seems like when you haven't felt it, seems this is absurd. It sounds absurd to some people, and it certainly did to me many years ago. It sounds fluffy, like nonsense, especially when you look at the world. But there's this idea that I found that really resonated with me too, that every soul eventually, no matter how far they deviate, comes back to this point, to this unity, to this recognition and awakening, because there's a magnet within the core of every soul's journey pulling you towards the creator that you are one with, or the source that you are one with. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, in some sense that one may see that the people that's not awakened, like how could you still be asleep? But the way that you put it, like it kind of trigger a thought that it's almost like we go through those really tough, like obstacle, challenging course and or boot camp. And wow, like, hey, we starting to come out and starting to sit down on a chair and have a water break. The people that's unawakened, they still going through the obstacle course. So like all respect to them, like the obstacle course is not easy. And they're still like crawling through the mud and jumping, climbing walls and stuff. Like so much respect.
Yes. By the way, I still am as well. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm constantly crawling through the obstacle course. It's just within a different context. And that's why I say I completely believe that, I'm imperfectly perfect. There's no pretense of like I'm awakened out of state or anything like that. It's just, it's within a different context. The challenges you go through, it feels within more of perhaps a spiritual context or a divine context, these challenges, but I'm still challenged. But I know exactly what you mean. And yeah, it's like you can kind of witness the world from like a bigger picture level and kind of saying, oh, this is just the collective evolution into a higher truth. And it kind of makes sense. It kind of makes sense when you see all the struggles and everything going on. And you have a deep compassion for everyone. And when you didn't know about these ideas, you had no, like not you personally, like you as in me, anyone, before you come across these experiences or ideas, how can you know that which you don't know? I didn't know. I was going through all my life and just, I didn't know. Then you come into this deeper kind of space of knowing this spiritual dimension, and then you're acquainted with that, and then it makes sense. But then once you weren't in that state, which a lot of people still aren't, or weren't aware of these ideas, it makes sense, and you kind of have compassion for that. So there's no judgment.
Yeah, the awakening process is a bit like there's the old saying of you know what you don't know what you don't know. Well, the you don't know what you don't know is infinite, so you don't know until you became one or reconnect with the source. There's always going to be like you don't know what you don't know. But as far as the you know what you don't know and you know what you know, from an awakening standpoint, that part is more expanded. Now, I'm not talking about learning more about how to build a car or how to invest in properties. It's from a how this universe works, what are different dimensions, why are we here? Like at least from that perspective, we are part of nature, we're part of the universe. Like that part has become more clear and it just makes more sense.
Yes. I don't know what you said about that I don't know thing, but it confused me into a state of presence. I was like, that's a good thing. Like, so I know exactly what you're trying to say for sure. Yeah.
So I'm interested when you woke up from the moments of infinite love with tears streaming down your face, like what happened in the hours and the days that followed?
Yes. Well, for many months after that experience, I was still working I was working a casual job actually in kind of retail. I was working in a bottle shop at the time, and so I just was going to and from that, and I was still
But before
things out.
that moment, I guess I'll give it a bit of context. Like when
Yeah.
there's a few milestones for my awakening journey, so it's hard to say like what was it that was the big one or the one that really sparked it off. And some could say that your whole life is an awakening journey. But when I had my suicidal attempt, there are a few things that happened. It's just like, huh? Like for example, one of the incidents that happened is like I was wanting to jump off my balcony and I didn't know whether it was the right decision or not. So instead, I climbed over the edge and I just hung on. And my thinking is that if I hang on and if I can climb back up, that means it's not my time. But if I fall, maybe that's my time. So I hung on and hung on. And long story short, to the point that I realized that I can no longer hang on and I can't get back up, the song Hallelujah came to me. And then like I had never listened, I've listened to the song, but I don't think about that song. The last time I thought about it, who knows how long. But the lyrics in that song, like after I fell down and it was all okay. Well, not okay, I was injured, but I was still okay. Like I looked up the lyrics of that song, and almost every sentence, every word, it spoke to me as if how I was feeling. It says like the king was put down to his chair, his hair was cut. It's basically someone has a big ego is put down to say that you no one has been humbled down. Your faith is strong but needed proof. So I have faith there's something out there, but it needed proof that's a miracle, is something stronger. So it started off this cascade of like all the snowball effect. It's like there's like I mentioned one, but there's at least like 3 or 4 other things that happen at the same time that is too coincidental. It's like, so throughout the whole night, like I was reading books, I was watching, like looking up internet for like what was happening. And I know early on in the piece when this was maybe like 6 months earlier, when I had energy going through my head and I didn't know what's going on. And again, I looked up the internet and found that it was the first time I actually found the word like spiritual awakening and Kundalini awakening. I've never heard of that term before. So that was me. I quickly look, what happened? So did you go through something like that? What happened? Was there people you could talk to? Did you talk to your girlfriend about it? Or did you try to go back in that state again? Or was it you just let it pass and back to normal?
Yeah, I now I understand what you meant by your question, and that's a remarkable story. That's so touching, and again, it kind of goes back to that, yeah, that unexplainable, synchronistic kind of divine timing of certain things that really shape your entire life. That, Gary, that is a phenomenal story. Yeah, so I'm so blessed that you're here. I mean, that's remarkable. Yeah, so to be honest, I don't really remember because so many awakenings have happened since that point. I don't remember anything specifically happening right after that state in terms of the subsequent days. All I remember is that whenever I would think back to that moment, tears instantly would come. Like months later, I couldn't even think about it. As soon as I think about it, even if I'm in public, tears down the face straight away.
Was it a very fake memory of what happened, a blurry memory, or is it like still very, very clear?
It's more of, I wouldn't say it's a memory, it's more of a state of being that you immediately start touching, or rather merging into, as soon as you kind of, I suppose, recall what the energy of that experience was like. And because that love is so pure and so unconditional and so accepting. And that's actually incidentally what you realize the source of what God is it's infinite goodness, beauty, and love. And so it's never judging you in any way, which is where religion gets a lot wrong. It thinks that you have to do something to earn God's love or the source's love. But when you realize in that moment, you realize that in all your flaws, no matter what you've ever done in your life, you're still infinitely loved. There's nothing you can do to ever not be loved. It's extraordinary when you recognize that love, the power of it. So that brought me tears just recalling back to that. However, it did thrust me into the dark night of the soul, which I think is what you're referring to, where I had that experience. And if anything, coming back from that, the disparity between such a high and then my mundane life, which really hadn't changed. Like I still didn't really know my purpose. I still didn't really have any outer situational changes. I was still in the same job and I felt, but somehow there was something lit within me that gave me a deeper hope. But yes, I couldn't turn to anyone. I started having energy pouring out from all my chakras. I started walking around and kind of, for a moment there, my consciousness was quite high and I'm starting to leave my body a little bit. So I remember there was one day I was with my ex-girlfriend. She didn't know what was going on, by the way. She was just trying to be like, okay, do I want to stay with this guy anymore? And she did. Like, she was very supportive. But it was very, very confusing. And I didn't have anyone except the people online, really, that I could relate to in any way. And that's partly as well because I'm more of an introverted. I like more like a close soul tribe of really close relationships rather than a big number. I've never been a big number of acquaintances and friends and social circles. So I don't really have that many close people to talk to. But I remember there was one day we went out for a burger, trying to make things normal, like trying to pretend that what had happened in this big awakening and everything changing hadn't happened. And we would try to go see Toy Story 4 and have a burger. I'm looking at this Toy Story 4 and seeing Woody and just looking at him and going, we are one. and at that point, it wasn't like a Woody and I are one, like a beautiful thing. It was like, oh my God, I'm one with Woody. Am I crazy? This can't be. And like kind of having like fearful, I had a lot of fear, like a lot of purging of all this fear I'd been holding on. I didn't know that this was actually a healthy sign of me processing layers of egoic emotional debris trapped within me, actually purging for my highest good. I was very concerned I was doing it wrong. I was in fear. I was going to attract something bad. But then we went out for burger nonetheless after we watched that movie. And I remember eating the burger and going, And I felt kind of like I was eating nothing, just like vibrating nothing, like not a burger, and people walking around like characters in the movie. It's very disorienting when you're integrating just how different your life can be when you're really kind of awakening into your soul's alignment. And of course, as you come into that, it's a joyful thing because you realize the reality is like an alive field of love and light. And as you integrate that and you come back into your soul's uniqueness and personality in an integrated way, or more integrated way, it's a beautiful thing because then you're light and free. But for many years, that wasn't the case. And I was very, very much struggling to process that and understand that for sure. Very, very hard times.
So who was the first teacher, be it a book, a video, or a person that actually gave you some framework? Because from,
Yes.
again, give it a bit of context, like my framework is that I brought up, Western society, and it's very intellectual. In the East, it can be intellectual too, but I think that at least they got thousands of spiritual tradition that hasn't been completely eradicated. So for me to understand, I need to put a framework around like what is it called and how does it work? What are the steps? What are signs? What are symptoms? How do you overcome it? It's kind of like Western
Totally.
medicine. Okay, so these are the symptoms. These are the ways that you treat it, and these are the causes as well. So when do you start to like find a framework of what you're going through, and maybe start to find a teacher and maybe even a tribe as well?
Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. All along, I found people on YouTube. Believe it or not, YouTube is my main source. I used to really love reading. I read dozens and dozens and dozens of books, but after this awakening, I found more drawn to just listening. And I'd go on long walks listening to YouTubers, and like I'd find
What
various
were you
famous.
reading prior to the awakening?
I was reading like lots of philosophy, lots of more traditional self-help books, Tony Robbins and such, about motivation and purpose and things like that, and kind of touching the edge of what I would now know as spiritual awakening, like Dr. Joe Dispenza books about quantum physics, and really it was much more intellectual, I'd say, left brain stuff that really gave me confidence that I wasn't becoming woo-woo and disconnected from like a normal thing of what most people accepted at the time, because that's with the philosophy and everything, I was brought up with a rigorous kind of skepticism, and also having the scientific background, like not just entertaining anything. So I was reading more books like motivation, self-help, and kind of scientific spirituality, if you want to call it that. And then after that, it was more some books, but more a lot of long walks and contemplation. That's actually one of the things that I realized was part of the reason why I realized I resonate with being a guide and a teacher in some sense, because I go on walks and all these downloads and new insights, interconnections come to me. And I realize that's part of my purpose, is to make some of those interconnections come up with unique stuff. Having said that, a lot of that, the framework was actually from YouTubers. So I really love, really famous spiritual teachers such as, Sadhguru or Muji, to other big YouTubers. Like there's many I followed. I've mentioned a few on my channel previously. Like I like Aaron Abke, if you've heard of him.
Yeah.
Bentino Massaro. I like Leo from actualize.org, Matt Kahn, Rupert Spira. Like I dabble a little bit from all these different sources and just kind of build my own framework of what was going on and coming up with my own worldview. So you just get insight here and there from all these amazing people. And then what I find really satisfying is then connecting it myself and creating something new. And that's where I try and come from.
Yeah, I always find it interesting to go back to connect the dots to see why we did certain things. And like Steve Jobs says, like you don't know how all the dots is going to connect until you look back in your life. For
Yes.
me, it's marketing. So now that I'm helping other people amplify their sharing through this podcast, it just makes so much sense. For you, philosophy is like, well, it makes sense. You mentioned one of the people you follow, Leo from actualize.org. I think he also did philosophy or something to that extent.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. He did.
so
Yes, I believe.
for you, like, it's no mistake that you went from that path. And it's interesting that in the past, like, we think that it's the ego self that actually drove that decision to say that, like, I'm going to do this course. But who's to say that, like, when we are just walking around, a thought that popped in to say maybe you should do philosophy, that wasn't embedded or sent to us from a higher power. Like now that you recognize that you go on walks, you're getting download. In the past, it's like, well, I came up with that thought. I'm the smart person to say let's do philosophy.
That's so true. Yeah, it's the more you do, or at least for me, I find that the more you do awaken, you do come up with those, you do think, wow, is everything just really a divine orchestration of universal will above and beyond my understanding? And whether you really come to that truth or not, something that I feel that blossoms out of that is absolute humility. And then so when the more you do awaken into these beautiful states and divine realizations, etc., the more it comes to you. Well, you can really sense when you're taking credit. And so another beautiful teacher, Dr. David R. Hawkins, is one of my inspirations as well. And so I learned from him one of the phrases. I heard him say it years ago, but it only really connected to me recently. All glory be to thee, O Lord. So whenever there's a win in my life, whenever there's a realization, it's not that I can't celebrate that, because that's the beauty of life. You get to celebrate it, but you're not taking credit in a prideful sense. And you're saying, even if I get to celebrate this win or this beautiful thing in my life, this realization, this person, this event, anything, immediately there's a recognition that this whole experience of life, it would not be possible if not for the divine source, for God. So you go, all glory be to thee, O Lord. And you're constantly being humble before this higher power. And yes, you're ultimately one with it, but you're also a soul kind of co-creating with it. And when you're in more of that soul human-based identity, you really don't know how it's happening. I mean, we don't really know how this is all being architected and orchestrated and flowing and evolving and expanding. The consciousness constantly expanding. We don't really know how it's happening. It's like a big mystery, and it's remarkable. So you just have absolute humility for that. And you also know that at any point life can throw you things, and it humbles you again to the point where it humbles you so much you realize there's no point being prideful, because life can sense that, and it will just throw you the next thing, dissolve those feelings of pride and come into humility again and again and again. Which humility is just basically confidence that's aligned, but flowing and accepting and embracing of whatever comes one step at a time.
Prior to this podcast, by looking at your website, I actually judged you, because I guess one of the big thing that when I was going through this process, like I went through personal developments, and then from personal developments, when I started to go through the awakening, it's like, okay, well, you can bend reality, the spirits, and there's all these things that can help you, law of attraction stuff. Let's combine it all together to manifest the dream life, because we come from the 3D and materialistic world. And at least for me, part of my identity is that I don't want to give all that away. I still like money. I still like the lifestyle. And so how do I utilize the newfound knowledge on how to hack reality and incorporate into my life? And then, but eventually now for me, where I am right now in my life, I just go with the flow. I just know that I'm going to be looked after. And doesn't mean that I don't do stuff. If I get called to do things and whether it's make more money or whatever it is, I'll pursue it. But it's no longer, it's like I wanted to fully hack my reality. And not to say that anyone that focus on manifestation is wrong. In fact, we do manifest our reality. So if you focus on the wrong thing, that would show up. But what my point is that when I saw that is you talk about manifestation, hey, I'm kind of over that stage already. And you're teaching people how to manifest stuff. Maybe that's like a high school and I'm in university. And when I was going through, like, Tony Robbins has probably been one of my biggest mentor, like throughout this process. I spent a lot of time with him, including going to India, which kind of, like, you could arguably say is what kind of really triggered some of these things. Like the first time I felt like energy going through my head and so overwhelmed, I gave Tony a hug and transferred the energy because it's so giving and giving all this energy out. But it's some weird and crazy process that happened in India. But when I was going through the midst of awakening, it's like at a certain stage, I looked at the stuff that he was teaching, and there was kind of like a little bit of not resentment, but like, hey, dude, why didn't you tell me these things? Like the stuff you're teaching is about building business, personal development stuff, how to be happy. But those content no longer served me. But now that looking back, and probably for the last year looking back, I start to, again, see his content with the new lenses. In the past, it's like, well, his stuff is for people with lower consciousness or helped me when I was at a lower level. But now I look at it, while embedded in a lot of his teaching is actually, he can see it from a higher perspective much earlier than myself, and it's already integrated in his life. In the past, one of his incantation or affirmation, you would say, is like, all I need is within me now. And I used to, like, when I chant it, I used to say, all I need, all Gary need is within me now. So I'm the one that my ego self, I can make it happen. So let's go and hustle and efforts and bustle and let's create this world that I want. So whenever I'm in doubt or in stress and need to change my state, all I need is me now. But now I look at it, I think what Tony is actually embedded within that meaning is that it can relate to people that are still focused on the ego self. But now that I'm seeing from a different perspective, all I need is within me now. Well, me, as in I'm this divine spiritual being, is within me. Like you said it earlier, that all the love is within us, all the abundance is within us. What else do you need? Like if you want to attract things into your life, it's within us. So I'm seeing that the genius in what he's sharing. And so for you, when you are sharing it, like throughout the whole conversation, if manifesting and trying to control your life, not from a place that, hey, let's be the magician and create magic. Like I saw it like manifest sometimes from some people. It's like I'm scared of the other side, what may happen. Let me try to control my reality. At least part of me, it was driven, that was what's happening to me whenever I was trying to manifest, because I was fearful that if I don't manifest the reality that I want, I'm going to feed towards something that I'm scared of. So I was trying to control. But when you share it about what's going through with you, there's hardly of that energy that's come through. It's like, you know what? You're speaking the language of people that can relate to, but ultimately the place that you're bringing to them is infinite love, is to getting to know the truth of all the power that's within them.
Yes. So well said, Gary. And that, I think that's a testament of how you relate to the Tony Robbins thing as your journey has come full circle, is a testament to your own growth and just how exceptional your own awareness is, exceptionally your own spiritual awareness has expanded to be able to see it through that new lens. That's a testament to you. And I would give you all the, you're giving Tony Robbins credit, I would give you the credit for that. That's a phenomenal thing. And manifestation, it's a tough thing to integrate that when you're kind of still kind of part soul and you're driven towards spirituality and still part ego and sort of rooted in the material world and wanting material things. And I think the simplest way to resolve that paradox is resonance. And the more you trust your resonance, even if that pulls you into the outer world, if you're really following that and it feels good and it feels authentic, it's going to lead you to an inner awakening to match the outer expansion. So the more you follow your soul's expression in the outer world manifesting, the more you deepen that inner reservoir of truth that's about to shine forth. And even if largely it's ego fueled, actually still trusting that if you really feel, I want to run a business and have $1 million, if that really, I need, even if that's mostly ego, actually in that journey and in that pull, all patterns of that ego, of that fear, of that lack, of that doubt will be excavated out of you, purifying you into a new state of awareness that's now ready, perhaps for a different paradigm, perhaps for a different perspective, and one such as yourself, where you come back to a real acceptance and flow and inner fulfillment that then starts guiding your life. And then the ultimate thing is where you really anchor in that inner space and you recognize, I'm still here. And you realize that the energy within you still is bursting forth to celebrate something. It's not to avoid something necessarily, but it's just this endless creative expression that's in your soul. And this is where some of the non-dual traditional spiritual teachings, I feel, are limited, because they kind of encourage you only to focus in and renounce the world and everything's an illusion, everything's Maya. And for me, that's an incomplete picture. It's not to say that you should only focus on the outer, but actually even when you realize that state, you'll notice there's still an authentic desire to celebrate yourself in some way. And it's more like a celebration in the way a puppy dog goes around a park to smell smells and interact with other dogs. There's no question, you're too busy living, you're too busy enjoying, but there's a life force eternally coming out of you. That's what true manifestation ultimately comes to. And you notice that all the big spiritual teachers, the most enlightened beings and beautiful beings that we know, like Sadhguru, they have a powerful creative vision and force. And some choose to perhaps meditate in a cave and stay really sort of isolated from normal society. It's really, any of it goes all together. It's all about resonance. But just to know that manifestation doesn't make you a bad spiritual student. And you shouldn't feel guilty for desiring what you desire. you should desire whatever you desire, because actually that desire is the divine looking to expand through you, even if that is simply to purge and heal away all patterns of ego in the process.
Yeah, I think you hit a nail on the head. When I was going through the phase of like trying to understand the manifestation, a law of attraction, I wrote down like 13, 15 different points on these are all the steps that you need to take in order to maximize your chances. I went through the experimental phases of like buying lotto tickets to see whether this actually works, just to prove out the theory. But ultimately, one of the most important points is that the manifestation has to be driven, what you just said, by the divine calling. Is calling you to pursue that versus just our fear of what you don't want. In fact, I could say that for most people in their lives, what they've attracted to them in their lives, if they spend more time in fear and thus attracting more, even though they may more want better health, but when they got back pain or whatever, it's like, oh, well, but I've got back pain. And so throughout the day, they're feeling a pain. I don't want this pain, and please get rid of the pain. And during the morning and the nights, in the 5 minutes or 10-minute meditation, they say, oh, I'm going to have a beautiful back and I'm going to be working perfectly. But for at least 10 hours or 14 hours of the day is focusing on all the pain that's going through. So that's why it's attracted to them. But if you feel like I'm going to be looked after, I'm going to be taken care of, even though you're feeling the pain, you just know this is a phase that will pass. It's just like the nighttime, it will come to an end and the sun will rise.
Yes, that's amazingly said. And you're right, it's really important that people are aware of a holistic approach to manifesting. So it's not just in a little bite-sized window, but really a way of life. Having said that, to make it even more heart-centered, it's to say a person that is in pain, whether that be physical, mental, emotional, whether that be a state of fear, to not feel bad if you're struggling to stay out of that state and into a more abundant, aligned state. And actually to say, what I find is most powerful is to actually approach yourself with absolute compassion and to say, it's okay, I'm really afraid right now. And when you kind of submit into it, you realize that that part of you that was expressing fear or pain was actually a part of the innocence of your consciousness that has been repressed and shut away. And actually by you submitting to it, rather than fleeing with it or trying to change it or trying to focus on, I've got to be positive, rather than coming into it and creating that unity in that relationship, that part of you all along that was in fear, that was expressing these doubts or these worries or this sense of control and all these thoughts that are attached to it, all along you realize it was never about those thoughts. Every thought that that part of you was having was actually translated to, please love me, please give me attention. It may say, I'm so afraid I might run out of money. What it really means is, can you love me? How loud do I have to express until you're willing to love me unconditionally? And when you realize that every part of your inner child or your ego self, which is just the innocence of the inner child in a state of inflammation, that's all the ego is. It's just an inflammatory state of our consciousness due to a lack of love. When you see it through that, you're actually able to live your day more holistically, as you perfectly said, in a state of more alignment, because your primary thing is not to force yourself into alignment, but to love yourself as you are, which actually is the very means by which alignment spontaneously arises more and more and more. And also find another point I would add to that is to see every emotion that you experience, be it fear or be it pain, not as a sign that you're doing something wrong and, oh my God, I'm going to attract something bad, but a sign of you doing something so right, you expanding your vibration to a new territory that you've never been into, never before. Because you're doing something so right that you're actually pulling out within you those patterns of emotion and thought that are actually being cleared away. And when you believe that, you actually create that space within you to set everything free, to be liberated into unity, rather than to judge yourself and actually keep those patterns cycling through because you're trying to follow a manual and a 3-step process to stay into alignment. So it's not that any approach is right or wrong. It's really what makes you feel good. And that goes for any teaching. What's actually making you feel more at peace, that's your truth. What's making you feel more in love with life, all aspects of yourself, that's your truth. What's making you feel good, that's your truth. And just trusting that above and beyond anything and backing that within you and gracefully going about your life from that space of self-compassion, love, and empowerment all integrated together. Is that sort of making sense?
That makes perfect sense. especially going through the awakening, like there's a sometimes that I fell into the trap in thinking that, okay, I'm gonna be the Buddha and be completely at peace and enlightened. That's the end goal. But amongst the journey, it's like, well, I'm doing all this work to purge out all this bad stuff and heal the inner child. Why am I still feeling like shit and upset? And now I'm getting triggered by things that I didn't get triggered in the past. But it's exactly what you've said.
Well,
That
that
there's,
voice in that moment is the inner child.
yeah, yeah,
That's how subtle it is. That's the inner child saying, "Why am I not the Buddha left? I'm healing all this," and that's the inner child saying, "Can you love that?"
yeah.
And it's so radical when you realize everything is actually an invitation for love. Sorry to interrupt you, by the way, but yeah, that's an indication to just love that. And then he goes, "Oh,
Yeah.
there's nothing that can escape that love when you really realize."
And also
Sorry, go
it's
on.
always, well, not always, but from my experiences, it's always been another level that just when you clear some stuff, there's another level. And that's the part
Yes.
of the interesting part of this whole game of life. It's when you can start to enjoy the different flavor versus like, oh, I don't want to eat chili. I don't want to eat coriander, but start to like, you know what? Coriander, oh, that tastes different. It may not be your favorite or your go-to thing that you want to taste, like fear, stress, anger, but when you feel it and you could be like indifferent about it. So, well,
Yes.
I was angry and not judge it,
Yes.
then that's kind of part of the healing process as well.
Yes, so true. And that's a really important realization as well, is that we don't have to pretend we like fear, but can we be with fear? Knowing that when we're being with fear, that is love, because your beingness is love. Your beingness is your awareness. Awareness is consciousness. Consciousness is love. It's divine love. That's what all reality ultimately is. So, can you be with an experience? That's all you really have to do is just be with it and allow it to have its expression, have its voice, have its say. That is love. And then if you do want to take it to another level, you can even authentically love it. And that's when you really feel the love of the source or divine love. And you feel how unconditional it is. It inspires you to actually unconditionally love everything. You may not be able to do it all the time, and that's okay too. You simply love that part of you that can't. But it's desire or that understanding that it's possible to love so unconditionally, because that's what you are. And that really sets you up for I feel like the most compassionate, heart-centered, powerful awakening journey. Even though you're right, it's just another layer comes up and another insight, and it kind of goes endlessly on. When you're guided by that approach the whole time, you're constantly unifying as you're expanding.
What are some other practices you could recommend someone try when they're going through the depression that you once were going through? Or maybe not depression, but just going through a difficult period in their life,
Yes.
or some of the practice they could try?
That's a great question. If anyone is going through a really hard time, my heart goes out to you. And I really do believe that there's so much hope for everyone, no matter how dire. I really do believe what you said earlier, that something that a phase passes and the sunlight shines again. And so sometimes it's about keeping on, and just doing your best job every day and loving yourself and being so proud of yourself just for getting through it. Sometimes it's a matter of that, seeking help in any basic way, but just ultimately getting through it. But what I would say really helped me at a sort of mindset level, I suppose, was having a desire to find my purpose and live a life of purpose, and being connected to putting the context of my life into that of service. It really helps when you look about serving others, no matter how big or small. It helps you kind of focus less on yourself in a beautiful way, and it helps you direct that energy out to the world. So it would be focus on your purpose and set an intention to find that and follow your joy in that way.
Can you give an example, Tom? Because I mean, when
Yeah.
people are going through a difficult period, like maybe a divorce right now, or maybe their business is on the brink of collapse, or they in severe, like they just found out that they got some terminal disease, then they said, well, like, yeah, that sounds good in theory, but I'm not thinking about serving people. Like, and
Yes.
probably for me, like serving people, they're thinking, oh, let's go out and volunteer the time in some homeless shelter or somewhere. What advice can you give to those people that, yeah, it sounds good in theory, I want to do it, but my circumstances doesn't allow me to serve people?
Yes, yes, I totally understand what you're saying. Yes, and perhaps it was a little bit of a broad statement, say it applies to everyone. So for those people, I'd say yeah, my heart goes out to you. Sometimes it's very hard. And I would go back to point number one, which is do whatever you can to make it through and make sure that you're not judging yourself through it and actually somehow trusting every day that life will get better. Because I do believe that we are powerful creators, and that it's, as long as there's that flame of hope and that practical sense of just getting through day after day, if you will find the resources, you will be able to heal, and you will be able to make sense of the pain or the struggles and challenges you're going through. I mean, that's speaking from personal experiences. Sometimes I didn't have the answer, but it was just, I'm just going to keep going, and I'm just going to be as kind as I can through this. And eventually the clouds parted. And it seems to be a theme that I talk to a lot of people, and they come out these phases. So I'd say in a really dire situation, sometimes it's about just making it through. But if you do feel more, maybe it applies more if you're trapped in a job that, is maybe soul sucking, and you're just healing out of a relationship and you're getting back out into the world, it would be to see your life like you are the hero on the hero's journey. Raise your whole context of your life into a more inspiring state. The way I do this is I connect to people throughout history that lived through some of the most ridiculous challenges imaginable, and seeing, oh, they persevered and they did so for love. They did so for goodness, for virtues, to have an impact greater than themselves. And it's not that ego thing of, I've got to conquer the world and become, not in that sense, but just for its own sake, to be a vehicle of inspiration and love for its own sake. And if you can know that that's possible for you, and you deserve to think about your life in that context, you will start manifesting things into your life that start nudging you on what you can do, whether that is just volunteering on a weekend, or whether that's a new business idea that you slowly will start taking baby steps to creating. And as soon as you're on that path of greater meaning, you're seeing your life as a hero on a hero's journey, it really helps alleviate your focus on your pain and starts gearing your life towards something more creative and divine, inspiring. I found that on my darkest days, that a sense that I'm living for that really pulled me through. It certainly got me up. I don't know about you, but it certainly started my business when I was getting off the ground, when I was putting my first videos out there and I was facing tremendous fear, or when I was in the dark night of my soul. And I remember coming home from my job with nothing, no hope, and I shivered in the bathtub, and I didn't even have the energy to get out of the bath, so the water just drained itself all the way to the bottom. And I felt so existentially alone after the awakening. I felt like I couldn't even turn to another human for help, because I was like, do these people, I'm talking to nothing here. It was like, I've really felt so alone and hopeless. And yet something about connecting to this inspiring state that I will make it through, that my life has meaning, that there is a purpose, and I am right about that. And focusing on that as a really big picture way that you're going to live your life really pulls you through. And then there are practical things as well that you can do. Like I really recommend meditation, 10 minutes per day. You can join, for some people, breath work. I found is really healing and powerful, and can really move stagnant energy and really create powerful healing. So those are some go-to things. And then you can speak to someone, and you can just be involved with positive ideas, positive people, because their ideas have a certain energy and consciousness to them. And that, again, starts to change the way you're thinking, reprogram you. And if you do all these little things each day, so maybe a minute of affirmations, 10 minutes of meditation, you just stick to something simple, it compounds over time, and it really guides you through, and you can get out of a difficult time with some of these more basic things as well.
Well, let's put it to put good use and tap into some of your enlightened ideas on how do you see the current situation of the pandemic. Like Melbourne has been locked down for who knows how long, probably a year and a half now, and longer than any other city in the world. And logically, some may say, well, the people that's not liking the idea of the lockdown, I guess nobody likes it, but especially the people see, well, compared to the number of infection rates or death rates compared to the rest of the world, this is a minute number. And people dying from the flu is there's more people dying from the flu than from this, what's going on. So logically, why are you locking us down? And some people, like we've seen the recent strikes and protests, like workers are losing their jobs and losing their income and livelihoods because of what's going on. How do you see past all the dramas of what's happening?
Yeah, it's a good point, because I actually live in the city of Melbourne as well, so I can literally see I sometimes hear screaming about shouting, or like that energy of a little rah 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 of like a group, kind of something happening. I look out my city window, I can see literally some of the protests going through the street. So I really am in the heart of it in that sense. To be quite honest with you, sometimes I'm quite affected by it, and that's okay. So sometimes I feel overwhelmed. I don't know what to make of it. That's my honest truth. Other times, and thankfully most of the time, I would say I'm able to see it from a really broad point, which is that there is a great healing and awakening in consciousness happening, and to trust in that at a very big picture level. Of course, how does that get me through, how my business been challenged financially? How does it help solve, relationships that have been strained and practical stuff? Well, it sometimes does and it doesn't. Sometimes that energy coming from that ultimate sense of well-being, trust, resting in the present moment and just connecting to love and not needing to justify that really does influence your actions, and things start flowing and popping up. And so it actually is very helpful. Other times it's just that big picture just gives you that moment of peace and relief in that moment before perhaps you do feel a bit more overwhelmed by it. I ultimately feel that my view is that humanity will make it. I do deeply believe that. Unfortunately, there is a lot of suffering and it's extremely hard. I would never take that away or try and sugarcoat that. It's a very difficult place to incarnate as a soul. Very, very tough. Just the nature of being in it is very, very tough in what we call the third density of ego, right? It's very tough. But, what do we find from every near-death experience where some of the people going through some of the most brutal things, and they actually get in such a state. I remember listening to a guy that had a near-death experience where he threw himself out of the car, so in despair, struggling financially in every way, depression, threw himself out of the car and banged his head on the pavement, and came up and was looking at his body and seeing all the police like resuscitating it, but then turned to a light. And the light is so powerful, it dissolves the entire thing. So can you even imagine how powerful the love and light is possible, such that in an instant of feeling it, the entire thing that's happening on humanity kind of dissolves away into a higher peace and understanding of its divine purpose? Sometimes my answer is no, I still can't see it. But can you intuit that it's possible that humanity will all make it, we all will return to this love, and that everything's happening perfectly as it should because it is? And when you accept it as it is, and you are rooted in this higher vision and understanding of a deeper truth that you can feel in your heart, it kind of helps you just do your best to ride with the waves as best you can amidst these definitely turbulent times. That's all you can really do. And that's how I get through, to be honest. I'm not sure I'm answering. It's very difficult to talk about this because I go back based really deeply on intuitive knowings and feelings that really can be so powerful. It roots you out of even connecting to these ideas. So, if someone's watching the news every day, they're constantly feeling like they're in a world of lockdown and all this crazy stuff's happening. But when you're rooted in the ideas that I'm talking about, it elevates you to such a point where there's nothing else going on other than you and me talking right now.
Yeah.
And that's really the energy that I try and live in, is just an absolute rootedness in that knowing that can't be explained but can be felt.
Mm. And last night watching some of the things from 60 Minutes about like the Facebook whistleblower, they talk about the Facebook algorithm, that the more that you watch what's going on, the protests, the people getting locked up or the police getting injured, whatever side that you're looking at, the more that you're looking at, the more the polarized content is going to serve to you because they want to get a reaction. And similar to the news in a way, the more fear sells, the more of these fee-based like stories, that the more it triggers your reaction, the more that it's going to serve you these things, the more that you're going to see this world is so divided. But
Yes.
compared to some of the things that's going on in other parts of the world where people have no clean water and clean food, or even earlier in the times that people got sent to war prisons, education camp, re-education camps and stuff like that, like this is a walk in the park. Like those people will swap to be in your place any day. So the more that we can, as Tony Robbins says, I trade your expectation for appreciation. I appreciate every moment of what we have around us, the more that life just seems more beautiful, despite the external circumstances, despite, yes, the stuff that it seems like we're going backwards. But I think, like what you said about accepting of whatever that happens, if you're at peace with that, somehow a lot of the times the external just somehow just dissipates.
Yes, very true. Yeah, to those kind of people that are really struggling at that level, I'm quite frankly, I can't even fathom what that would be like. So I don't even know what to say other than I'm just inspired by such people that somehow make it through such things. certainly in this, maybe in a past life, I've recalled some past lives, but really I can't speak for that kind of challenge. That's just so tough.
Yeah, you guys are the real spiritual warriors
Yeah.
compared to the monk that's just meditating in the ashram, have no external problems to worry about. Like you guys are actually going through the mud, going through the boot camp and showing us how it's done. So credit to all of you that's going through like difficult times. And I know I have complete faith that you'll find a way and you'll inspire even more people than you know.
Yes, that's it. I echo that. But you are right. At the same time, you can only do with what you've been dealt as well. So you shouldn't also guilt yourself for feeling a certain level of anything, or whether you have a certain thing or you don't have it. You've just got to, as you said, appreciate what you have and make the most of what you have. And the beautiful thing is, the more you appreciate and get into that frequency of presence, and you aren't reacting to that divisive information, and actually seeing how it's, see, with Awakening, you can actually see the tactics of fear and division trying to infect and take over the way you're thinking. But when you become so aware, you can see those thoughts and you can just lovingly let them pass through, to such a point where if those thoughts aren't there, you literally can't be aware of ideas that bring you that suffering state, and you're rooted in a flow and in just a presence. The best way I describe it is, it's like being a dog in a park. I mean, think about a dog. Like, I always marvel at this. You have two dogs that are happy, how it's just looking around wide-eyed, and then they can meet each other and they can growl and they can get into a really snappy argument, and then bounce off 2 seconds later, completely happy, like it didn't happen, like it never happened, and then meet each other again, and maybe they're licking and sniffing each other. I mean, that's really the power of unity consciousness, is that you can be in this flow state that's just really rooted in this knowingness. You're not thinking about it. You're not thinking about this knowingness or trust or flow. You've become it. You've become one with life. And in that, there's no possibility, or far less of a possibility rather, to be pulled into fearful ideas and these stories that we're being bombarded with, because you're already too busy living and too busy trusting and too busy feeling the love and gratitude of being alive and making the most of this crazy experience on Earth that we call Planet Earth School for Souls.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, Tom, for those that want to further connect with some of your sharing, do you have courses? Do you have books? Do you have videos?
Yes. Yeah, so first I would say check out my channel. There's a lot of video content there, and I upload on a weekly basis. So I'm sure you put all these relevant links in the description. Then you can check out my website. I offer one-on-one coaching for people on a spiritual awakening journey, and people also trying to create things in their life from a heart-centered way, so manifestation as well. I work with clients and people one-on-one every week in their journey to create these healings, awakenings, and positive expansions in their life. So you can check out that. I do have some online courses as well that you can see in the descriptions of my videos on my website too. And yeah, I would say other than that, follow me on social media. I post there too. And I reckon overall my channel would be the best place to go just to start with if you'd like to connect with me more.
Yeah, thank you for all the work that you put out, not only for this podcast, but all the content you put out on the internet to reach out to more people, and especially for introvert to push through their boundaries to serve other people. Like it's you walking the walk, like you're walking the talk, that you have to overcome your fear to do so. So thank you, brother, for being such a shining light, and love you for all that you've done and all that you're going to do.
Oh, thanks, Gary. That's so sweet of you. I don't know if we didn't touch if you were an introvert. Are you an introvert?
I've done such a
maybe.
good training with my extroverted stuff that the introverted is not such a big thing. But if I'm in a crowd normally, like I'm not one of the one that's talking. I'm usually the quiet ones.
If that's the case, then I can also extend the compliment back to you and say, well done for stepping into your courage and your power, and with this podcast and putting yourself out there and being a father and a family man and balancing all this and promoting these kind of new, loving, high consciousness teachings and worldviews and ideas. It's truly cutting edge and so inspiring to me. And I wish you all the best with this podcast. I really just, I know that it can just explode. It's got so much potential, and hopefully it reaches people and impacts people all around the world for the well-being of all.
Thank you. To top that off, I'm actually standing on 1 feet, like actually balancing it all right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you like what you've heard, like feel free to share this podcast with other people that's going to help and serve them. Thank you for listening and looking forward to be in touch.
Thanks, everyone.